Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Anika Apple Podcast. I'm your host, Anika Apple, and it's so good to be back with you. I'm excited to deliver this month's divine guidance and to talk you through the 4 key themes for the upcoming month. But to those of you who are new, welcome. It is my pleasure to be able to support you in this way. I am a trusted advisor and a divine voice. I bring my prophetic insight to the masses every month through the divine guidance. I'm sharing what it is that God has downloaded to me in the spirit of preparation for us and to help us understand the times that we are in. And in addition to that, I also work as a coach and am a speaker. You can find out more about me on my website, which is anikaapple.com. I also am the founder and creator of the Healing Crusade and the Remarkable Community. And the Healing Crusade is a great place where we come together to help each other heal as we go through our own individual healing and then also as a collective. And so if you are looking for a community of people to support you as you do your own self-directed healing, the Healing Crusade is the place for you. In addition to having community, we do challenges each week. So there's always something going on, a way for you to pause and reflect, do the introspective work, to explore some of the things that you might be going through, and of course, find relevance and connection through having community and hearing the stories of others. So if you'd love to learn more about the Healing Crusade, you can follow us at our Facebook page and on Instagram, both named the Healing Crusade. And to join, check out my website at anikaapple.com. And there's a tab there for the Healing Crusade and has all of the information about the levels of membership and how you can start off with us. So anyway, I hope that all of that is helpful to you, but let's come back to why you're here today. So this is the divine guidance for the month of May. And for those of you that are new, there are a couple things that you should know just at the onset. One, the divine guidance is always a foreshadowing. It's always looking out to the future. Typically, the messages that I bring have relevance from anywhere between 3 months to a year and a half. From a prophetic standpoint, what I see is typically 2 to 3 years out. However, with the divine guidance, it is just downloaded straight through me from God, from the divine, and it provides for us a more immediate outlook. Today's divine guidance also includes a little bit of reflection for you. So it'll be interesting to hear your feedback and your thoughts as you listen to this. So I'd love to hear you share or to see you share in the chat how these different themes land for you and what you have noticed already. And of course, as you go throughout the next few months, when there are moments that bring you back to what has been spoken here, I'd love to just hear the connection that you make. So I consider that to be really important to others that may hear this broadcast at a later time. And perhaps what you have experienced and what you share will jog their memories about the time that they have been navigating through. The reason we do this is so that there is the opportunity for us to have the preparation, so to speak, for what is to come. And we're blessed that, that we have a creator who loves us enough to create the space and opportunity for those that they have called upon to be divine communicators and to share these messages of hope, of encouragement, of understanding, and to give you context to help you discern and navigate through the time that we're in. The other thing that I would tell you is this, and it's a universal message, but I say it all the time because it's really important that people recognize. It is really important for you to make sure that you are always taking everything that you hear back to God. So my encouragement to you is everything that you hear me say today, that you should take it away. Even the things that are like, yes, I know that this is true. It's similar to what God has said to me. Still take it back. And what you're looking for are a couple couple things. One, you should always validate what it is that you've heard. Two, and probably most importantly, but what does this mean for me? It's great to know that and have an understanding of things that are happening in a general standpoint. But the key is going back to God to say, okay, so what's the relevance here? What should I be doing in relation to this? What do I need to understand? How is this impacting me? And that's really important because the message is general, because it is a collective word. And what you want to be able to do with it is discern what it means specifically for you, because all people are not in the same place. You're not all in the same position. You won't experience things in the same way. If you think about it, what does God get out of delivering a message through me or another person who has prophetic insight? It is to draw you back to God. And so a lot of times I think things are presented in such a way that it's very matter of fact. It's like, this is what it is, and that's it. And you should be secure and happy with what has been delivered to you. And that should never be enough for you. You should want to understand what the relevance is for you. And to get that, you have to see God. The other thing that I would tell you is that sometimes God will delay a response to you about what it is that it means specifically for you. And you have to be able to trust that as God is moving and God is shifting, and God will show you and help you to understand what it is when you are ready for it. Thank goodness that God loves us enough to give us space to digest and learn and explore before we know more, before we have more than we can handle. Because if you think back give yourself the last 5 years of your life, think about some of these significant events that you went through. What would have happened if you would have known those things were coming years before they happened? How would that have impacted you? You see, there's a beautiful way that God weaves that helps to ensure that we're able to handle what it is that God is giving to us before we have it. So that said, keep those things in mind as we go through these. You might want to grab a pen and allow yourself to not only jot down what you hear me say, but really what it brings up for you, what things you remember, what things you've been experiencing. So, and I know that you'll find a lot of relevance in this message. So thank you in advance for listening. And I encourage you to definitely share it with your friends, family, your network, people who you know would get a benefit from hearing this and who you want to support with preparation. So let's get into it. So May is considered a month of miracles, and May of 2024 was no different. There were a lot of miracles that people have had the opportunity to witness. The question is, and our first theme is, did you see it? So the question that I pose to you is, did you see the miracles? Did you experience the miracles? The miracle signs and wonders were all around you all throughout this month. Did you catch it? And if you didn't, it's okay, because now hopefully you will be more in tune as you continue to see more and more miracle signs and wonder playing out across the balance of this year. But I can tell you, there have been miracles around you. And it's important for us to begin to look to the things that seem more commonplace than what we typically think about when we think of miracles, right? I think a lot of the times we look for things to be so big, so massive, and newsworthy, like front page of the paper kind of miraculous act. And we only hold those things as being miracles. But what God is doing happens in the day-to-day. So yes, of course, there are these big, grandiose things that God is doing, but there's a ton of things that are happening in every day that could only be the hand of God. And the reason that the theme is, did you see it, is because God wants us to know there were things happening. And there's a question for you to consider of, did you see it? Were you paying attention? Were you really seeking after God? Did you pay attention to what you prayed for, what you asked God for? Did you see the manifestation of any of those things in this month in ways that were miraculous? Sometimes when things happen, we will explain it away by what makes sense to us in our humanness, instead of recognizing and acknowledging that, yeah, I'm glad this happened, but this was not me. It was not at my hand. It was not something that I did or created. We have to become more vigilant about seeing what it is that we've asked for and that we've expected. We have to become more aware about the things that we walk into that could have never happened without the hand of God, to be able to call those things miracles and to capture the testimony so that we can share it with others and encourage them. So the question for you, our first theme is, did you see it? And in this month of miracles, I want you to go back and I want you to think about the things that you were waiting for 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that have somehow come back into the middle, like I'm seeing a stove, like the middle burner on the stove, and now the thing is cooking again. And you're like, wait a minute. I never thought that thing would be able to happen. I never thought the plant, that little tiny sprout, was ever going to grow into this big, massive tree, but it did. And that could only be at the hand of God. The other thing to go back and consider are the lists of things that you have been asking and expecting God to move on. And when you saw those things move, did you recognize and acknowledge that it was the hand of God? Or did you think that there was something that you did to create this space? Because what I would submit to you is that it's a miracle when it is God doing it and your hands are not making it happen. You cannot make it happen. God wants there to be no question that the season that we are in is one where there will be miracles, signs, and wonders, where you will see and experience and know things that are out of the ordinary. And in that extraordinary move of God, you should be able to discern and know unequivocally that it was God that did it. And when that happens, the expectation, of course, is that you share the testimony so that God gets the glory. It is how God draws the men and women, the children to them. It is how they pull us back home by seeing and experiencing and remembering who God is and what God is capable of. So that is our first theme. So make sure you spend some time reflecting back on the things that happened. And if you're not an avid journaler, you are going to want to journal in this season. God has been saying to me, more journaling, even this morning. It is going to be really important in this season. And you're going to want to capture the things that happened, because it's too easy for us to forget these moments, especially the moments that are like the relief of pressure. Like I'm seeing the pressure cooker and the knob on the top, right? And it used to dance as it was letting out steam. Like I'm seeing that, like once it gets loosened to a point where there's not a whole bunch of pressure built up, you've opened the top or whatever, people kind of forget about the thing that's the pressure relief valve. Well, what happens when God comes through and delivers something for us, it's like, oh, thank you, that's done. And then we focus on the next thing that's not right in our life, the next thing that we want to have fixed. And that negates what God has just done. We don't want to miss what God has done. We want to call that out. We want to sing God's praises and recognize it above the way that we acknowledge the issues and challenges that are facing us in our lives. Because when we know and we are solid that God did that, then our faith is growing. And when our faith is growing, then those things that we are looking for solutions on, they're not the same kind of issue as what we've experienced in the past. Let's go to the second one. And there is a big shift that is happening right now. And the shift is for those who have been operating in alignment with what God has called for you in this season, what the divine has created for you. You're seeing a time where the harvest looks different than what you were expecting. It's bigger. There are things coming from the past that you have forgotten about, where you're wondering, how is this happening when I don't feel tired or exhausted? How is it happening when I haven't done a whole bunch of work and I haven't been moving to create this? And that's the shift. Well, this truly is not a theme for everyone. But for those who are operating in alignment with God, who know that they have been in genuine surrender, and God has been speaking to you about provisions, This is the time. And so what happens for many of us, we are the type of people who have grown in our lifetime by the work that we did. Even though we may know that it was God working through us, that God was doing it, that God was directing it, that God was giving us the insight, there's still this piece of efforting that has been comfortable for us. It's been the way that we experience things in the past. This is a different season. It is not about efforting. That doesn't mean that you won't have to do things, of course, but it's not the kind of effort that you've seen in seasons past. And without that effort, you have freedom. And you have the choice to live your life in flow. You have a choice to just be. And being, again, doesn't mean that there are not things that are required from you. But there's a shift here to the core thing that is the requirement for you being your time with the divine. Your time with God, listening to God, seeking after God, understanding what God is asking of you and doing that. A really good friend who talks about waking up and starting her day with God's agenda. And that literally looks like opening her eyes and saying, okay, God, what are we doing today? She may have looked at her calendar the night before and planned out some things for the day, but each day, every morning, she surrenders herself to what God has planned. That's seeking after God. That's looking to God to give you direction and clarity about what is to come. That's the posture that we want to be in. It's not about creating a bunch of busy work to look like you're doing a whole bunch of things. It's not about doing a bunch of busy work so you can do a whole bunch of things. This is about the shift of not efforting in the way you've had to in the past seasons. And for those of you that are cheering like, yes, this is the season I want, guess what? It never has to go back to the way it was before. But you do have to continue to actively surrender and seek after God. And surrendering is not about surrendering your free will. We co-create this life with God. Let's be clear. But it is about acknowledging God and asking God for more clarity on the purpose for which you were formed and what you are here to do. It's really important. But congratulations, enjoy it. Allow yourself to stop efforting in the way that you have been in the past because you no longer have to do that. It is such a phenomenal message and theme. Okay, the next theme for us is the changing tastes. The changing tastes. And it's about shifting to the things that matter. It's funny because when God gave me this theme, immediately I knew exactly where God was going with this, like what I know that has been changing. But in this moment, I just want to share this. It's funny. I am not a big coffee drinker. I've always just enjoyed the flavor of coffee. I'm a much bigger tea drinker, but occasionally I'll have a cup of coffee. And probably maybe 6 months or so ago, one of my really dear friends and mentors was sharing with me that, this experience of like some of the things that she typically would eat or drink or whatever, and like really losing the taste for it. And coffee was one thing we talked about very specifically. And it's interesting because I was making a cup of coffee the other day for a family member, and there was some coffee left over. And I was like, oh, I'll just drink this instead of my tea. I immediately spit it out. And perhaps there have been some seasons where it's like I just had not desired it, but to a point where it was like, I cannot even take this, like I cannot drink this. It's just not for me. That is, if we were to put a practical example together of this theme, that's it. It's like, this might have been something that you enjoyed before. It might have even been something that you tolerated before. It might have been something that every now and then you desired, but now it no longer meets your taste buds. It no longer is something that you, not only do you not desire it, but it's like, it's rejected because it's not important. So the question that you should be asking yourself, and when you think about this theme and in the season, the months that are up ahead, is what is it that matters? what really matters, and acknowledge that if your palate has changed, it's for a reason, because it's being prepared for the things that are to come that are important for you. How might this show up? Well, let me tell you. There's actually some really great scripture in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and verse 4 specifically just kind of sums it up really nicely, but it's verses 1 through 11. And if you go into that chapter, you'll recognize it talks about all of these different things that the experience that was had, and how beautiful, the writing is so beautiful about all of the experiences and the choices and the life that was created. And it's like, and at the end of the day, none of those things mattered. It wasn't about the help. It wasn't about, building. It wasn't about having more than other people. At the end of the day, what mattered is that wisdom was still there. Wisdom was there. Wisdom, which was the connection with the divine, right? And this is a beautiful thing for us, that the tastes are changing, because what I believe this allows us to do is not get caught up in the fanfare of the platforms that God has created for us, to not be lost in the behaviors and attitudes that people typically have as they move into seasons of abundance, like the harvest that is up ahead for so many of us. So when we shift in this dynamic, releasing the things that you no longer have the taste for with grace, with gratitude, with appreciation is the way to go. So it's like, yeah, I didn't like the coffee, right? I spit it out, moved back into my cup of tea for the day. And there is something to be said for the way that you accept that your tastes have changed. So recognize that as there are things that you used to really get joy from, perhaps they were things that you really desired to have, and you finally have them, and you look at it and you're like, I wanted this thing for such a long time, and now that I have it, it doesn't even matter. It's okay. I want you to know that that's part of the path. It also is important that we never covet or idolize things, right? And so in some cases, it's really good that we are going through this experience so that the things that are coming to us through the harvest of the next season don't become idols, that they're not things that we covet, that they don't become more important than our relationship with God. It's really, really important. And so know that, expect that your tastes are going to change. And it may not mean that you don't desire nice things, or creature comforts is what I call them when I'm talking to God, right? It doesn't mean that you don't desire those things, but you put them in proper order, that you know they don't matter more than what God is doing through you. They don't matter more than the purpose for which you were formed. They don't matter more than what's happening with humanity and the role that you are to play to support the healing that needs to happen, or the transformation or destruction, or whatever the case may be for your specific assignment. And all of those things can be understood through the conversations that you have with God. But your tastes will change. They are changing. And again, for those of you who read the Bible, Ecclesiastes has a really great scriptural reference for you. Okay, lastly, the big theme for everything is that, I feel like I need a drum roll, is that your horizons are being broadening. So this season is all about broadened horizons. And what I want you to imagine is that you have a home, and your home has what you know is an invisible property line, right? And you imagine like the home that, like, maybe there's a vacant lot next to you on either side, but you know there's a property line, and perhaps there are trees that mark each end of the property line. So you can see that kind of invisible line going all around the sides of your property from front to back. Well, now what happened is God is revealing that somebody made a mistake on that property line. Those empty lots to the left and the right, those are yours too. That's how I want you to think about this theme. You have been assuming that everything within this space was yours. But what God is doing for you is broadening it. What God has done is stretched it out. What God has done is doubled and tripled, is grown whatever your property was exponentially. That's what this theme means. And when you think about a horizon, right, we think about, I love the horizon where the ocean meets the sky, right? There's just, you can see as far out as you can see, and then you can't tell the distance anymore. It's like you need something else as a point of reference, like a boat out there or whatever, but it's like the horizon just goes on forever, for as far as the eye can see. And you know that where you can't see it anymore, that it just keeps going. That is the now. For all of the things that you have been doing and will continue to do that honor God, your horizons are broadened. This broadening of horizons means you are now seeing, you are going to begin to see and know that God has been doing something so much bigger than what God told you. So for some of you, it's like God gave you some very specific direction. Like, I need you to work on this project in this time frame and to do it in this way. And you're like, okay, I can do this, but it feels small. Perhaps it's like, I thought it would be so much bigger. I thought what you're asking of me was going to have such large implications, and it doesn't feel like that's the case. That may be what you have been experiencing, and it's okay. Because what you had was what God needed you to focus on in this season so that the other things could be birthed, so that the other things could come into view. Again, remember that it is so important to God that people cannot explain away the miracles, the signs, the wonder through the hands of a human. That it doesn't just happen through the person. That someone has to look at me and say, I see Anika, but I know she couldn't have done that herself because it's just too big. And when God is working through you, there's evidence that it's God. Right? So when you think about this broadened horizons, it's like you had to have this piece of it that made sense to you, that was tangible, that even as people were looking on and observing what was happening with you, that they could see you building. But then what God is doing, that thing is massive. And so the question is, how much will you allow God to extend those property lines? Are you going to set limitations on God and tell God, all I need is just, maybe I need 4 more feet into this one empty lot. I don't need anything on the other side. Are you going to stop God? Because what I would tell you is, even though you have changing tastes and you may not desire to have 3 times the land instantaneously, you don't know what God is going to ask you to do with those things. So your work in this season is to continue to posture yourself before God, seeking after God, asking God how to prepare you for what God is doing as they broaden your horizons. For many of you, this will mean travel. This will mean you changing your location. It will mean you doing things, going places, experiencing cultures and lifestyles that you've not experienced before. For many of you, God is going to pull you into groups of people that you are unfamiliar with because God needs you to minister to them in a way that only you can. For others of you, you have been feeling that pull. You've been feeling that feeling that you are being called to something. And you may not have the clarity about what it is, but you cannot let go of that feeling that you are being called to something. Guess what? You are. And it's okay that you don't know what it is, because that's what broadening the horizon is. If I were to stand at the beach and look at the horizon line, I could assume how close it is. But were I to get in a boat and start, paddling my way out there to the horizon, what would happen? As I keep going, the horizon keeps getting further, like it keeps looking like it is still in the same place, but we know it's further and further from the beach. It's further and further from my starting point. I can see it. I can assume what a distance is, but I can't actually ever see the place, the true place where they meet. Why? We know why. So in the same way, what God is doing is that as God is opening up the things for you, the places that you are to go, the people who you are to minister to, your purpose. You are just to keep going, to keep moving forward and allow yourself to be on the journey, trusting God to lead you to where that horizon line is. Trusting that as long as you're going in that direction, you will be on time where you're supposed to be to deliver what God has asked of you. And it's okay if you never get to that horizon line, because it's not even about that. It's about the doing, the being willing to move forward. I don't mean doing and efforting. I mean the obedience to God, the doing what God has asked you to do. So when you think about this last theme, I want to encourage you to get really joyful, to have a ton of gratitude, to find yourself in genuine worship of God. Because what God is doing is mind-boggling. It is going to blow your mind. It is going to blow the minds of all of the people around you, because it is just that massive. And for those of you who are starting to feel some level of angst about that, that's good, because now you know that this is something you need to heal before this time gets there. That angst, for those of you who are like, I don't feel any angst, I am ready for it, so that you can have empathy for the others. It's a recognition that sometimes when things are so big, it's like we worry that we're going to have the capacity to do whatever it is, to hold whatever it is, to care for whatever it is, to not mess it up, to whatever those things are. And so for those of you that feel that angst in this moment, what I want to say to you is, but when God is in control, all is well. You don't have to have all the answers, because God already does. God will send you the people. God will give you the plan. God will whisper the words in your ear. Whatever is needed, God has the capacity, the ability to do it. You just have to show up ready to receive. You just have to show up open to whatever it is that is being revealed to you. That's it. That's it. And so, how do you deserve these broadened horizons? Because God created you in their image and desires for you to have a remarkable life. Desires for your life to be so amazing that the mere experience causes people around you to say, I want to know your God. I want to understand more. How do you have peace in the midst of all of the things that are going on in the world? How are you experiencing joy when people are in such significant grief? You can hold both. Why? Because you're operating in the way that God has designed for you. And I'm really excited because for so many of you, you are stepping into your purpose with a boldness, a voraciousness, like you are ready. You have been waiting, you have been training, you have been playing in ways that were different in the past. And it's like, you're like, this is my season and I am ready. And I'm so grateful because we need you. We need your light. And what my hope is that you will encourage others, not simply by what they have seen in your experience, but that you'll take the time to identify the ways that God wants you to pay it forward, that God wants you to speak to others, that God wants you to bring others along, that God wants you to pour into the lives of others to help them gain and bolster the boldness in the way that you have, because we need them too. The next half of the year is complicated. Even in this time where we're talking about these shifts and the broadened horizons and all of these things, and I said in the beginning, this message is not for everyone. You know whether or not you have chosen God. You know whether or not you're in alignment with God. And wherever you sit, if you know that this word is for you, then you know. If you're sitting in a place where you're wondering, you've got to go back to God. If you know that this is not where you are, but it's where you want to be, guess what? You got to go back to God. But this is not a time where you want to be sitting in the middle of the fence. You've got to decide. Are you going to do what it is that God has called you to do or not? and know that not making a decision is a decision. So you can't unhear what you heard. So now make your decision, sit with God, be honest about the things that are creating friction for you, lay them before God so that they can be resolved, so that you can then make a decision about how you want to live out your life. That said, some of you are already starting to experience the things that God is doing, the changes and shifts that God is doing in the midst of looking to the left and the right and seeing that other people aren't having that same experience. That is, it is what has been our journey so far this year, and it's going to become even more pronounced starting in July. You are really going to see the difference. There's so much that is brewing. There's a lot that is brewing in the time up ahead. We know that there's a lot of political tensions. It's always like that when we have big, political, when we have big political shifts, and there are many. But we also have things happening in industries that we typically have found to be pretty consistent. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. You probably can feel that uncertain energy a lot of the time. And you might be wondering where it is coming from. Start to ask God to show you what really is coming from within you and what is coming from the environment, because you'll want to be able to discern the difference. When it's coming from within you, you own immediacy in correcting the situation. Why am I feeling anxious? What do I need to do to get back to peace? What needs to be addressed, healed, resolved, etc. And the things that are happening on the outside of you, the question then to pose to God is there something that I am to do to help reconcile that in this season, in this moment? Is there something that I am supposed to do to contribute to the experience of what people are having in the world? That's the way that you can navigate there. Last thing I will say is the harvest season for those, as I was talking about Broaden Horizons, and for those who know that you're in right alignment, this harvest season is ridiculous. It is massive. It's big. It's pronounced. It's unexplainable. I love that about a year and a half ago, God said to me, you are not going to be able to explain what I do in your life other than saying, but God, it was God. That's it. And as I've heard more and more people with prophetic insight saying that they have heard the same thing, that their experience has been that God is saying through them that you're not going to be able to explain it. I love it because there's so much confirmation. But that's what God said. You won't be able to explain it away without God, because it can't be explained without God, because God did it. And so if you are someone who typically tries when things happen to just kind of shrink back and just say, oh, thank you, not trying to draw the attention to yourself, but also not drawing it to God, you've got to shift that. This is your time to get really comfortable saying, God did it. I asked God for this. I prayed about this. God told me to do this, and this is what I did. It is important for you to get in the posture to be ready to testify. And for those of you that do that, who are constantly testifying and sharing what God is doing in your life, guess what you were doing? Moving further out. Keep chasing that horizon line, right? Because as you are continuing to testify, God knows that you will be responsible for ensuring that God gets the glory as more and more things happen in your life. For many of you, this season will be the best that you have ever experienced yet. And it can be a signal of things to come. All of that is, of course, between you and God, your specific purpose, where you are in your path, and whether or not you're walking in alignment with God. But it is incredible. And with all of that, I would still tell you that we're still in a complex time. Your healing matters in this part of the journey, because one of the things that you will have to reconcile with is the harvest in the midst of other people going through a famine as a way to contrast experiences, right? So for you to have more than enough and know that other people don't have. And what does it feel like to be in those places of difference? What does it feel like to be experiencing such joy and knowing that others are experiencing significant grief? And the difference would be that, because we see a lot of that in the world today, but the difference would be that as a child of God, as someone who is honoring the divine, you have to be able to hold both and still do what it is that God tells you to do. And so in so many cases, your harvest may be intended for you to hold for a time so that you can grow it exponentially because of what God has asked you to do for those who need help and support. In some cases, God may be working through or working with others to get them to a place where they are ready to receive what it is that God has for them. So they may look like they're in a season of suffering or struggle, but it really is their version of preparation as God gets ready for their harvest. And so we have to know and understand all of these things, or accept. I won't say understand because it takes time to understand it, but to know and accept all of these things, that the conditions around us are not going to look the same. Everyone is not going to be experiencing the same thing at the same time. It just is not. It just will not be that way. It doesn't matter how much we want it to be. It will not be that way. So knowing that and being able to accept it is important. And in order to do that, you will likely need to do some healing work. And so I encourage you to sit with God and ask God what that looks like for you, and ask God to reveal places for you where you can focus on your healing. What are the things that God would call your attention to? And what are the ways that God would encourage you to do it? At the beginning of the broadcast, I shared about the Healing Crusade. That's certainly a place of resources, but trust me, there are tons and tons of resources out there. Therapy is something that I always strongly recommend, and I do think it will be really important in the seasons up ahead. For many of you who have come from lack, who have experienced a lot of scarcity in your life, and who are going into this robust harvest season, it's a big shift. And it's not just about having the things that you wanted and now having them in your hands. It really is a shift to be at a place of harvest and say, now what do I do? How do I take care of it? And I had an experience a couple of years ago with something that God gifted to me. And I found that even probably 6 months later, I was still shying away from talking about it. I was still uncomfortable about what God had done. And because it didn't make sense to me, I couldn't make it make sense to other people. And I wanted to be able to explain it, but I couldn't explain it because it was not my choice. It was not my sole decision, right? And God had to help me navigate through that, heal the relationship that I had, to see where it was even coming from, to even have the discomfort about it. And what I know about this particular gift that God gave me is that it was a symbol for me to hold on to through a really complex time of my life. Because every time I would see it, I was reminded not of the thing and whatever its value and all of that stuff is from a worldly perspective, but God's reminder that God has me. God sent it as a reminder that I am taking care of you. And no matter what challenge came up, that thing, that particular thing, it was never at risk. God made sure of it. And so it was a physical symbol that God gave me to remind me of who I am and how closely they are guarding what it is that is happening to me in this experience. That I am covered and taken care of and provided for. But I could not have explained it until I did the work around healing. So I want to really encourage you to think about the role that a therapist can play, a coach can play, community can play, because I know that they will be really important for you. It is not easy to navigate those things by yourself because we can only see what we can see. And that said, I will close this divine guidance message in this podcast episode by letting all of you know there are spots left for advisory with me for this year. My clients are spiritually curious. They are desiring to really connect with the truth of who they are. It is time for them to stand boldly in their purpose, and they're really looking for ways to bring their purpose to life in all areas of their life. When I look at the way that I lead as a coach and advisor, it is about integrating and helping people bring all of themselves into the room, so the best of them shows up no matter where they are. And in order to do that, we have to help people reconnect with their spiritual center. If that is something that you are finding some challenges with, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to me via my website to book a discovery call. It's a great opportunity for you to have some conversation, to learn what I offer in the different resources and programs that I have, where I may be able to support you on your journey. Reconnecting with your spiritual center, strengthening your resolve of who you are, and creating a remarkable life are all things that are available to you should you decide to choose them. I'm here ready to do that work and to support those that God has called me to. And so if you think that I may be a good fit for you and that what I offer is of interest to you, then I definitely encourage you to check out my website, set up a discovery call, and let's see where God leads us from there. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Anika Apple Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Divine Guidance. Of course, drop some notes in the chat. Let me know your experience of it. Have you already seen it? Did you already experience some of those miracle signs and wonder and want to share those more broadly to encourage others? Are there some things that you want to explore more? And come back, after you have gone a couple of months into the second half of the year, so past the month of June, when you're getting into July and August, you should be able to look back and see some of these themes and how they've come to life. And I can't wait to hear your stories about the broadening of your horizons. I cannot wait to hear your stories about how God took the territory lines, those property lines, and expanded them from you. So make sure you come back to share those things as well. All right, everyone. As always, peace and blessings. We'll see you next month.